Let's cover some new things that you can do with articles. The thing is, in Spanish, articles can sometimes be treated like nouns by themselves without requiring nouns. How does that work? Well, let's go ahead and revisit the articles scene. So you're walking between two barns painted with sheep art. What do you see on each side? See if you can remember in your imagination. The main big sheep on the left is la. The main big sheep on the right is el. Then we also have una for a, un for a, masculine, and then las to mean the plural the on the left, and los to mean the plural for masculine nouns. Today, in the middle of the path between the two barns, a giant low tree stump has appeared. This is our image for the word lo. What is this? This word means the, and everybody hates this word. The thing is, you use this word to mean the when there's no noun. This almost never happens in English. In English, we say, for example, the good thing is that we're here early. In Spanish, we don't always use the word thing here. Instead, we just say, the good is that we're here early. So this refers to an abstract non-noun idea about what's good. So here's a similar sentence. In English, we would say, the difficult thing is that it's mostly uphill. In Spanish, you can simply say, the difficult is that it's mostly uphill, or lo difficult es que it's mostly uphill. I mean, in Spanish, in both of these cases, you could use the word cosa, and then you'd use la. So you could say la buena cosa, or la cosa difficult. But that's just really not idiomatic. Native speakers are more likely to use the lo tree stump here, the word that lets you use the without a noun. For the purposes of this challenge, focus on this sentence template, basically a description with the before it. Lo, description, es que, and then a sentence. You can do a lot of fun things with that. For example, the nice thing is that it's a nice day. Lo, nice, es que, it's a nice day. Or maybe the terrible thing is that he won't call me back. Lo, terrible, es que, he won't call me back. Or maybe the funny thing is that she was sleepwalking. Lo, funny, es que, she was sleepwalking. Incidentally, when you see or use lo in your Spanish conversations or in reading Spanish, you'll always know whether it's meaning the versus when it's meaning what it normally means, which is him or it as a direct object. And that's because if it's a direct object, it's going to be directly attached to a verb. It won't in cases where it means the. Now, this new word, lo as the, isn't the only version of the that can be used without a noun. It's bizarre to English speakers to use the without a noun after it, but let's look at how you can do this in Spanish. So in English, we have this thing that we say. I like the one that we saw yesterday. For context, let's say that we're talking about houses and we're comparing different houses. I like the one that we saw yesterday. I could say I like the house that we saw yesterday, but I'm just using shorthand for that. I like the one that we saw yesterday. In Spanish, you don't say the one that. In fact, the word one is never used this way. Instead, the word one is simply left out, and you say the that. Instead of I like the one that we saw yesterday, you say I like the that we saw yesterday, or I like la que we saw yesterday. Or let's say you're talking about people. You met a guy but don't remember his name, so you ask your friend. In English, you could say he was the one that was talking with us. In Spanish, you would say he was the that was talking with us, or era el que was talking con nosotros. Or if it was a woman, she was the one that was here that day. Era la que estaba aquí ese día. The phrases el que and la que are actually extremely frequent in Spanish. You'll see them all the time, and you'll sound like a native speaker if you start using them all the time, too, anytime you would say the one that in English. So how would you say, these things are good, especially the one that's here? See if you can figure this out. This is, estas cosas son buenas, especially la que está aquí. There's one more phrase to learn in this video, and it involves the word lo. Suppose instead of el que or la que, we used lo que. For example, I want what he has. Yo want lo que él has. Wait, didn't we already learn the word for what? The word que. Well, that word que is pretty much only used in questions and exclamations, or in some cases when there's an implied question. The phrase lo que is specifically used when you could say the one that. In fact, just go ahead and try it in this sentence. I want the one that he has. It works. And honestly, this is the most frequent way that lo is used as an article in the phrase lo que. It's used all the time to mean what, but specifically not to ask a question, but in place of the one that. Here's another example of how you might use lo que. I like what you're cooking. I like lo que you're cooking. So you could say, I like the one that you're cooking, but you're more likely to say, I like what you're cooking. And this is how you should be using lo que. You can always do the one that test. So if you see the word what in English, it's probably going to be either que in a question or lo que if it's exchangeable with the one that. Let's try out lo que, el que, and la que in a mini quiz before we learn a couple new nouns in the next video. In this first example, let's say that we're playing with some little boy dogs, and I'm talking about the one that you're holding. I like the one that you're holding. I like el que estás holding. Next, what he said was funny. This isn't a question, so it's going to be lo que. It's exchangeable with the one that. You could say the one that he said was funny. Lo que he said was funny. What is this here? In this case, we're using que as a question. ¿Qué es esto aquí? I see what you did there. Yo sí lo que you did there. In this next example, let's say that we're playing with some little girl dogs. I can't find the one that you liked. I no can find la que you liked.